In order to determine if an equation defines y as a function of x, there's two things we need to do. One, we need to solve that equation for y, rearrange it like we've done before. And then two, we have to make sure we get a single equation when we're done with that. And you may be thinking, well, how can I rearrange something and get two different equations? Well, I'll show you down here. So down below, let's see if these equations define y as a function of x. To do that, we need to get y alone. So we'll start with something hopefully very basic. I'm going to start by adding 6 to both sides. So I get x plus 6 equals 1/2 times y. And then to get y alone, I could either divide by 1/2, but that's kind of weird. I don't like to divide by fractions, so instead I'll just multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2. So I'll multiply both sides by 2. That'll have the same effect of canceling that out. Since I want to multiply this entire side by 2, don't forget your parentheses. So once I distribute then, I've got 2x plus 12 equal to y. So once again, to answer the question, I needed to do two things. One, solve it for y, which is what I just did. And then two, do I get a single equation? And yes, this is a single equation. So this does define y as a function of x. You could also think of it this way. If this was your equation and you plugged one number in for x, would you always get just a single number out for y? And yes, of course you would. So this one is a function. Take a look over here and you can probably guess that this one's not going to be a function that defines y, or an equation that defines y as a function of x. But let's take a look and see what happens. It begins the same way, or a similar way, subtract that 1 from both sides. And so x minus 1 equals 2y squared. Next up, I would need to divide both sides by 2. So I'm going to have x minus 1 over 2 equal to y squared. And then finally, to finish this, I'll need to take a square root. And here's where things get a little bit different. When I take the square root, and you may recall from last year in Algebra 2, when you take the square root when you're solving, you don't just get that one answer, but actually you get the plus or negative, the positive or negative version of that. Same is true for when you rearrange equations. If you take a square root, you've got the positive or negative equation. So my new equation, or I guess I should say equations, is going to be y equals plus or minus the square root of x minus 1 over 2. And so we've solved for y, but notice this time we haven't gotten a single equation. We've actually gotten two different equations. So I can get two outputs for this, meaning to answer their question, no, this equation did not define y as a function of x.